The negative spaces is one that it keeps on coming up in adventurous classes at the moment, that people have forgotten about this whole idea of negative spaces, because I only teach it to you in one lesson, because to be honest, it'll be boring if I keep on smacking you in the head with another lesson on negative spaces. You only need to learn it once and you've got the idea. Now the trick is to remember that the next time you draw up something interesting and unusual that's a bit weird and different. Whenever you're drawing up something new, don't forget the negative spaces lesson. So when you're drawing up a tree, I'm going to switch over to this camera so that I can share what I'm talking about. I haven't got an image in front of me, but let's say you're drawing a tree and it's got really interesting, unusual, I like doing center lines for trees instead of worrying about thickness of things. I'll try and draw this dark so you can see. So if I've got a great big tree trunk and then there's a couple of branches coming off here, this is a pretty bad example, but you'll see in the, when you get to the oil painting course, we do a gum tree. That's a beautiful painting of an Australian gum tree, a eucalyptus tree. And we start off by doing this method. But it's got some gnarly, twisted, unusual trunks on it. So when you start to draw this up, you look at the width and the thickness of the trunk. And it's coming down here. And then I'll just change this into being a single branch up here. And so when you start doing these, you put the thickness in, and that's not quite right there. Actually, in this, it's quite interesting, this tree that we did, it's got this really weird branch that kind of twists around. Like it's really been hammered in the weather over the years. And so it's quite an interesting, unusual sort of branch that's kind of curling over one another. You can do the drawing, but remember, don't forget about your negative spaces. Because if you remember that and you're just looking at your drawing and you're going, you look at your photo, you look at your drawing, you look at your photo, and you're going, there's something not quite right. I don't know what it is. When I look at the branches, they all look fine because your eye tracks along. But if you stop and you say, okay, I'm going to use my last little check, which is negative spaces. It's a whole second page of being able to check your drawing. So when you look inside this area here, like especially if there's a branch in here, see there's this interesting shape here. You can look at that shape there and go, this is the shape that I've drawn in this space. Go and check your photo reference and is it the same shape? And often it's not. So you can look at the photo and look at the negative shapes in the photo and then see why this branch is not in the right position. So especially if you have, like you often get little triangles in trees. So you get like this really interesting triangle shape. And if that triangle's too wide or too narrow, you'll immediately know that that branch is not in the right position. So if you constantly check in with the negative shapes, let's say there's another branch here, then you'll start to get your drawing much more accurate by doing that second phase of checking. So your first thing is you draw the actual thing. If it's looking a bit wonky, then you can go, right, let's look at the negative spaces on the photo and compare the negative spaces and make sure they're the same. And you'd be amazed at the number of clues you get from doing that. So I want you to try and remember those little mini lessons in the Learn to Draw. It's really good if you keep remembering those things through every future drawing that you do and every future painting, especially if you're having problems with the shapes not being quite right. You look at it and when you look at the positive object, it looks fine to you. You just go, I can't see what's wrong with it. It looks fine when I track along the branch or when I track along the road. It looks fine. But if you start going, oh, well, what about the negative shapes? Oh, that triangle's too big. I need to shrink it down. Something's got to move.